Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So all the trees outside my window have turned red. The weather is really nice this evening and I'm gonna do a sketch in my art journal. So this view is not really a classical view for painting a good picture, but I'm trying to select some important elements that shows the sense of depth or distance. So I'm gonna explain in more detail in how I change this kind of really ordinary view into something really interesting. So I'm gonna sketch over this whole page. It's a square shape. So as you can see, I drew a frame and then I wrote down the date and the date. So I'm kind of measuring with my fingers of the placement of the two houses on the other side of the street. So now after determining the placement, I'm drawing the rooftops and a little bit of a house body and the tree covering it in the front. So most of these two houses are being covered by the red tree. And keep drawing this pole in front of the two houses. Now I'm drawing one of the red trees embracing the house on the right hand side. So this tree is the layer on top of the two houses on the other side of the street. So when we're sketching, it's really important to identify, to be aware of the layers of objects in the landscape. And now I'm drawing the tree branches and twigs. So instead of drawing every single tree branch and twig out there, I'm just focusing on the main ones that I see. Drawing the tree trunk and then keep adding more details for this house here, like the windows. I think the windows are really important for the houses because they're like the eyes of the houses. And keep adding more bushes, the little trees in front of this house. Drawing the driveway, the lawn. Keep adding more rooftop details. Okay, so now I'm drawing this car parked right downstairs. It's almost the same size as the house on the other side of the street. And this is a really strong element that shows juxtaposition and gives a sense of distance or depth. So basically when I'm drawing cars or other vehicles, I see them as a little bit of complex cube shapes. A cube shape means we can see the three sides of it. So the back of the car is one side of the cube, the side of the car is the other side of the cube, and the top of the car is the top part of the cube. So basically we can see the three sides of this complex cube shape. And now I'm adding another layer. This is basically the treetop covering this car in the very foreground. So another layer of element. So instead of copying the leaves out there, which has a million details, I'm just drawing really quickly to capture a quick impression, not worrying about the exact placement. And now I'm drawing this sidewalk line. This is a very important line. As you can see, it's parallel to the other side of the street. And we need to pay more attention to lines like these instead of other smaller details. Okay, and now I'm adding this red tree in the foreground. So when drawing trees, if I can see the tree branches and twigs, I always draw those first. That's easier to determine the structure of the tree. And now I'm adding these loose leaves hanging on the branches and twigs. So the leaves are almost, falling off this tree, mostly. It's half bare now. Because this tree is really close to me, I think it's the closest tree. I'm adding the leaves in more detail, those maple leaf shapes that you can identify. And this process is really satisfying and meditative. Okay, so as I mentioned before, these simple parallel lines determining the dimension and direction of the road and street is much more important than the other details, like the details of the tree. Okay, just adding a few more leaves and add a little bit more detail for the forest in the distance. Okay, so now I'm starting to draw these fallen leaves on the sidewalk and on the street. Again, we don't have to stress too much about these details. Just draw as many leaves as you can. Okay, and now I'm drawing this other tree a little bit far away, near the driveway of my neighbor. And then add more sidewalk details. Pretty important. And keep adding more loose textures for this tree here. As you can see, I'm using pretty simple squiggly lines to show the texture. The technique can be really simple. The only issue is that you know how to translate what you see into these simple symbols. Adding a little bit hatching for the tree trunk and for the branches to give more density. More details for that tree mostly being covered. And now I'm drawing this other car a little bit far away. As you can see, it's smaller than the car on its back, using the same idea as seeing it in a cube shape. Okay, I think that's enough details. So that's the finished line work, and now I'm gonna paint with my watercolors. It's Etcher watercolors with 24 half pans in it. Okay, this is the most exciting part of sketching, is to paint. Okay, so for the first layer, I'm just wetting the sky area first with clear water. When painting a landscape, I always like to paint the sky first. Wet on wet, some medium yellow to show the sunset sky color. And some yellow for the forest and other tree parts because those trees are glowing in the sunset. A mix of yellow and light green for the grass. And this leftover gray from my palette mixed with ultramarine blue and purple and green for the street. Very quick and loose wash and very light and watery. Adding a bit of yellow-green for the trees and forest in the distance. Now I'm only focusing on the overall atmosphere that I want to capture, the sunshine color. And now I'm adding cerulean blue for the sky, for the top of the sky, blending with the yellow on the bottom. So just use loose, broad brushstrokes to add the very first impression color for everything, including the trees, and keep everything watery. Those brown for the rooftops. The negative space behind those large trees. And the first layer for the red tree is a mix of orange and magenta red. Again, keep it really watery, wet on wet. So this water brush that I'm using right now is a Holbein water brush, and it's very watery. The size, I think, is a large tip. So at this stage, it's pretty important to relax and keep the brush strokes very loose. It's actually good to have the paint flowing outside the outlines and merge with the other layers, and that creates a really loose and mysterious atmosphere. And now I'm switching to a thinner water brush. It's a Sakura medium tip water brush. So now I'm going into a little bit more detail by using smaller brush strokes to refine some smaller areas. The forest in the distance, and now the tree in the middle ground. A darker tone of green for this tree in the foreground and the grass to add a little bit more contrast. Paint the tree branches and twigs with brown, just so there's more definition. Mixing in magenta red and a little bit purple for this second layer of the red tree. Adding an even more variety of red oranges on top, and also I'm using smaller brush strokes to give more sense of details, to suggest the definition of the leaves. Very quick choppy brush strokes, and same for this tree over here. And now I'm actually painting wet on dry, so the brush strokes can stay clear and not merging with the first layer. So when painting watercolors, it's pretty important to keep adding a few layers, like maybe 2 or 3 layers, to give a depth and density for the things that we're painting. Adding a bit of shade for these cube-shaped cars, and leave the top part white to give contrast and 3-dimension. Paint some falling leaves on the sidewalk and on the street. Smaller details here and there. Adding a very watery layer of red for the street, because I want to show the reflection of the tree leaves on the wet road. So here is my finished sketch. I also added the time and the note. The sunshine came back after 2 days of rain, feeling much better to see the glowing colors again. So I'm pretty happy with how this sketch turned out. I think I really captured the looseness and wetness of the evening atmosphere after the rain. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please click like and leave me a comment below. If you have any questions or suggestions, please don't be shy to leave me a comment below, and subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. I will see you very soon next time. Have a great weekend.